Number 71 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. With regard to interpretation, for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding. Please also note that during the meeting it is not permitted to take pictures in the room or screenshots of Zoom. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me and we will suspend in order to ensure that all members have full access to translation. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January 30th, 2023, the committee is continuing its study of U.S. countervailing and anti-dumping duties on Canadian exports of certain softwood lumber products. We have with us today Alberta Forest Products Association, Jason Cripps, President and Chief Executive Officer by video conference. The Business Council of Canada, Trevor Kennedy, Vice President, Trade and International Policy. Gorman Brothers Lumber, Nick Arkle, Chief Executive Officer by video conference. And New Brunswick Lumber Producers, Jerome Pelletier, Chairperson by video conference. And United Steelworkers Union, Jeff Bromley, Chair of the Wood Council by video conference. Welcome to you all. We will start with opening remarks and then proceed with rounds of questions. And Mr. Bromley, I understand that you have to leave shortly, so I will give you your opportunity to ensure that your comments get on the record. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the opportunity to jump the queue, as it were, as my flight is about 45 minutes or so, and I do have to run. And through you, so thank you to the clerk and all members of the committee for the opportunity to join you here today. My name is Jeff Bromley. I'd like to begin by acknowledging my office is on the unceded territory of the Ktunaxa Nation, located in southeastern British Columbia. I've spent 29 years in the forest industry in the Kootenays in southeastern BC, and I now serve as the chair of the United Steelworkers Wood Council. The council is made up of 11 local unions across Canada, representing 14,000 forestry and manufacturing workers, and approximately 1,500 members in Quebec. The United Steelworkers Union is the largest private sector union in North America, with 225,000 workers in nearly every economic sector in Canada, including 15,000 workers in the forest industry. To begin, I think we can all agree when we're talking about protecting the forest industry, we're talking about the Canadian economy. But we're also talking about the workers, their families, and the communities that they support, a very large majority of which are in rural Canada. But there's more. Along with steel, aluminum, cement, wood products produced in Canada have some of the lowest carbon emissions in the world. And Canada's forest products are a net carbon sink. As we look for ways to lower Canadian and global emissions, Canadian wood products need to be part of the equation. The Americans are already on it. The Biden administration is tying together infrastructure spending with fighting climate change and creating good union jobs. Canada should be a natural partner. But instead of becoming a bigger and bigger supplier to the US of forest products, we're shipping them less and less. Competing nations out of Europe are earning larger and larger amounts of the US softwood lumber market because they aren't being hit with huge tariffs that the US puts on us, even though they have to ship their products across the ocean. Other countries can get their products into the US market for yet less, and they are. For example, 10 years ago, Russia exported less than 1,000 cubic meters of lumber to the US. By 2021, before Putin's latest invasion of Ukraine, that number jumped up to over 1 million cubic meters a year. Meanwhile, last year, Canada exported close to 6 million fewer cubic meters of lumber than we did just 6 years ago. Let me put that into perspective. For every 850,000 cubic meters per year that we export or use, that equals roughly one sawmill, one operation. Approximately 160 workers make between $80,000 and $100,000 a year. And let me assure you, our members are not stocking that money away into offshore bank accounts. Their money gets spent to grow their families, and it gets spent in their local communities. Now, I'm not usually a defender of the employer. In fact, I'm heading into bargaining with the number 1 and number 2 largest forestry companies in the country this week. But when markets for the softwood commodity are low, unfair duties add an increasing percentage of cost from anywhere from 14 to 17% over the 7 years of this latest US-Canadian softwood lumber dispute. The duties and the anti-dumping amounts have been set at various amounts since the expiry of the last deal in 2017. And the difference can mean the employer is staying above water or not, which means the difference between our members working or not. And I will say, well, when things are going well, the ability of what they make gets put back into developing the Canadian industry. And the future of our industry is getting higher value from our softwood products in the form of CLT or cross-laminated timbers, for example. And that will take capital to add to the ability of these mills to produce high-value, carbon-neutral products for the future. As for the US tariff money, it goes to the American economy. It goes to the American industry, and it goes to paying American lawyers to keep defending the tariffs that jacking them up. The US softwood lumber lobby in Washington continues to say that our publicly owned Canadian forests are subsidized to our industry. They aren't. Our industry builds the roads, decommissions the roads, and plants 3 seedlings for every 1 tree harvested. And on average, pays 1.5 times the average wage and benefits of the US industry. It goes without saying that these tariffs are unfair and damaging. And we know that they can contravene fair trade and almost all WTO decisions. But the government has missed key opportunities to scrap them. The US government, that is. So I hope with the work of this committee, we do better next time. And with that, I thank you for the time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bromley. Mr. Cripps, for up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Cripps. I'm President and CEO of the Alberta Forest Products Association. First and foremost, I'd like to recognize that I'm currently in Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory, and our members operate in Treaty 6, 7, and 8 territory, and I'd like to acknowledge those that came before us, as well as the Métis Nations of Alberta as well. So the Alberta Forest Products Association is a nonprofit organization that represents sustainable forest industry in Alberta since 1942. We represent companies that manufacture lumber, panel board, pulp, paper, and secondary manufactured wood products in Alberta. Our members range from small local businesses to large publicly traded corporations. Alberta's forest sector supports over 30,000 jobs throughout the province. These are well-paying jobs in a sustainable sector, creating products that are in demand around the world. AFPA member companies produce over 3 billion board feet of softwood lumber in Alberta each year, approximately 13% of Canadian production. Well over half of our members' annual production is exported to the United States. Those exports are subject to the unfair anti-dumping and countervailing duties that the United States, in this later iteration of decades-long softwood lumber dispute, known as Lumber 5, has been imposing since 2017. When the United States Department of Commerce made its final dumping and subsidization determinations against Canadian softwood lumber in November 2017, the affected Canadian industry, along with the federal and provincial governments, requested binational panel reviews of those determinations, as was our right under Chapter 19 of NAFTA. Decisions by these binational panels are critical to Canada's interest in the softwood lumber dispute. Because they have direct force of law in the United States, they can be Canada's most effective tool for challenging the unjustified duty orders against the Canadian softwood lumber and for recouping the billions of dollars in duty deposits, currently well over $7 billion, that our members and other Canadian exporters have been forced to pay under those orders. Given the importance of these binational panels, one of the biggest sources of frustration in Lumber 5 has been the conduct by the United States that has prevented the panel process from working as it should. That conduct takes three forms. First, the United States have been exceptionally slow in nominating its panelists. Second, when the U.S. has nominated individuals to serve on panels, those nominees have been anything but independent and impartial. Many of them have been involved in the softwood lumber dispute while serving at the Department of Commerce or have represented the U.S. industry. And the United States has repeatedly renominated candidates that Canada has previously opposed because of material conflicts. Third, the United States has refused to nominate or appoint panelists concurrently to hear panels or appeals from the Department of Commerce decisions in what, since the 2017 final determinations, are now 3 subsequent administrative reviews. AR1 for 2017-2018 period, AR2 for 2019, and AR3 for 2020. Instead, it has insisted that each panel must be appointed successively. Largely as a result of the United States conduct, the panel hearings in the anti-dumping appeal from the 2017 final determination took place only last week, more than 5.5 years after the appeal was launched. Panels still have not been composed to hear the AR1 appeals, which the Canadian parties launched in December 2020, nor the AR2 or AR3 panels launched in 21 and 22. That backlog is likely to take longer than Commerce issues when Commerce issues its AR4 final determination later this summer. To put these delays in perspective, the rules of procedure for binational panels under the NAFTA and its successor, the CUSMA, contemplate the entire process from the request of the panel review through to the panel's decisions should take approximately 10 months. When the panel process has been conducted as intended in prior softwood lumber disputes, and even in our disputes under the CUSMA, these timelines for the most part respected. Preserving the binational panel process was a key objective for Canada in the CUSMA negotiations, one that Canada bargained hard to achieve. When it achieved that objective, the government rightly claimed it as an important success. Unfortunately, that success has been illusionary. Due to the United States conduct, the panel process is not operating as intended, and Canada is not receiving the benefits it bargained for. As a result, our members, like softwood sawmills across the country, have no effective recourse for the billions of dollars in unfair duties that the United States have charged them, an amount that continues to grow daily. We recognize that Canadian officials at Global Affairs Canada have made repeated efforts over the past several years to persuade the United States counterparts to approach the composition of binational panels in the Lumber 5 dispute in good faith. We are extremely grateful for those efforts, but sadly they have not succeeded. It is clear that resolving this issue will require political engagement at the highest levels. It is our strong hope that the Prime Minister will undertake that engagement with President Biden to ensure that the binational process functions as the party is committed to, and going forward, our appeals from the U.S. panel lumber duty determinations can be heard expeditiously by fair and impartial panelists. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cripps. Mr. Kennedy, for up to 5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, committee members, thank you for this invitation to take part in your meeting on Canada-U.S. trade issues. The Business Council of Canada is composed of 175 chief executives and entrepreneurs of Canada's leading enterprises. Our member companies directly and indirectly support more than 6 million jobs across the country and hundreds of thousands of small businesses. Since our establishment more than 4 decades ago, the Canada-U.S. partnership has been a priority for our members. We played a critical role in supporting the development of the first free trade agreement and its expansion into NAFTA, as well as our new framework, the CUSMA. Today, Canada and the United States enjoy a strong, mutually beneficial trade and investment relationship. In 2022, we had a record year of exports, and in the big picture, the future of bilateral trade looks bright, in large part due to the greater certainty provided by the CUSMA. Unfortunately, this certainty is not extended to the softwood lumber industry, nor to various industries that rely on lumber inputs, such as home builders. We believe the only workable long-term solution to provide certainty and stability for the industry would be a new softwood lumber agreement. We're disappointed that 8 years after the expiration of the last softwood lumber agreement, there is no new agreement in place, nor are there active negotiations toward one. A new agreement would clearly be in Canada's interest, but also in the interest of American consumers as well. We understand there's been resistance by certain industry groups in the United States to negotiate a new deal, and as a result, this has not been a priority for the administration. However, we know there are many supporters in the United States as well. Just last year, members of Congress called on the United States to return to the negotiating table. We were especially encouraged to see United States Senators Menendez and Thune, a Democrat and a Republican respectively, call on the administration to negotiate a new deal to benefit industry and consumers, particularly to reduce home building costs and housing costs. Following up on this initiative, the Business Council of Canada sent a letter to the government calling on the government to work with congressional leaders as well as other supporters in the United States to build some renewed pressure toward a new deal. This is still possible, and we encourage Canadian officials to intensify efforts with like-minded partners in the United States to make progress toward negotiations this year. Securing a deal becomes more important as we approach the review and what we hope will be a smooth extension of the CUSMA in 2026. While there's still considerable support for the agreement across a range of stakeholders, we should not take this support for granted. To create the conditions for expansion, it should be a priority for Canada to reduce the number of irritants and disputes facing the trilateral trade relationship, and reaching a long-term solution for softwood lumber would certainly improve this discussion. Another challenge in resolving this dispute has been the current state of the WTO appellate body. This concern extends well beyond softwood lumber, but this dispute demonstrates just how important this institution is for Canada. We were encouraged that the 12th Ministerial Conference at the United States, as well as other WTO members, agreed to restore full functionality of the dispute settlement system by 2024. We urge Canada and its partners in the Ottawa Group to work closely with the United States this year to overcome longstanding concerns and restore this important system. The recent expansion of Buy America rules to include a broad range of construction materials further threatens to harm Canada's access or Canada-U.S. lumber trade. We reiterate the importance of Canada securing a carve-in to proposed restrictions in place for government procurement. So just in conclusion, we urge Canada to prioritize securing a softwood lumber agreement. The Business Council and its members stand ready to support efforts to build a more stable and prosperous Canada-U.S. relationship in a competitive North America. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Mr. Arkell for up to 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'd like to also recognize that we operate on and alongside both the Okanagan Silk and the Secwepemc Nations. I'd also like to have a special welcome to Richard Cannings, who I know resides most of the year just 40 minutes south of us. So nice to see him on the panel.
Could you turn your camera on, please?
Is it not on?
We were missing a handsome face. There it is.
Yeah, I apologize for that. As I scrolled across to unmute, I must have pressed the camera at the same time. Apologize for that. Anyway, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present to the committee. I am Nick Arkell. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Gorman Brothers Lumber, based out of the Okanagan here in British Columbia. We're a BC-based, independent, family-owned, operated company, currently in its third generation. We've got 5 divisions, from what I would call very small through to mid-size, but totaling just under 1,000 employees. And that's before you count contractors and all others associated with the businesses. We've operated continuously without interruption since 1951. And while many of our employees, we have many employees, we'd still be considered small to mid-size based on the throughput of logs that go through our mills. We're an economic driver in each of the communities we reside in. And then when you add all the associated multiplier benefits, it just makes the importance even more. Our 2 largest divisions are focused on producing a variety of high-value products directed at the interior and exterior home finishing and renovation markets, with a large portion of that going to the US, although our products do actually go to over 30 countries worldwide. We are a member of both the BC Lumber Trade Council and the BC Council of Forest Industries, both of whom I know are also making their own written submissions. I would like to point out that we fully support the positions and comments that will be identified in those briefings, and we do strongly believe in a pan-Canadian position regarding this dispute. We also understand and appreciate the statutory rights of US producers under US trade laws. We believe in working constructively to find a negotiated solution to this trade dispute really is the approach we should be taking. We're not afraid of litigation. We strongly believe that our industry on both sides of the border, though, has so much more in common than differences. And I experience this all the time when I'm on trade trips. We can and we should work together collectively to promote this incredible product that we all produce. There's an insatiable appetite for lumber products, and the benefit of using this product, as we all know, goes so much further than just the consumption of it. The role of sustainable forestry and lumber use should be a major part of the climate change solution. It's not the problem. A greater use of wood across North America and within the global context should be aggressively explored, not barriers to its use. A combined North American position working together would be far more efficient use of our combined resources than battling through ongoing trade disputes. We'll continue to work closely with Minister Ng and her staff with a focus of ensuring that high-value products are specifically recognized in any process or developments going forward. We appreciate the time that has been spent to date by both the Minister and her staff to better understand the high-value portion of the industry and the specific impacts that we face. The time the Minister gave to a personal visit to our operations last year to better understand the challenges of the high-value producers was particularly appreciated. This submission is to identify that high-value producers are disproportionately impacted due to the duty being based on the total value of the product as it crosses the border. What must not be forgotten is that high-value products require refined processes, special and targeted marketing, and customers building programs together with the producer. It comes with very high cost. Many of the companies producing these high-value products are small to mid-sized companies that do not always have the same financial and borrowing depth of the larger producers. Should this dispute go on for several more years, many small to mid-sized mills, especially those producing high-value products for the US, will be stretched beyond acceptable stress levels. Any and all delays in arriving at a settlement, whether due to delays in the administrative review processes due to the absence of appointed panelists or any other reasons, could cause irreparable damage to the high-value lumber industry. We believe high-value products need to be considered carefully going forward and receive the same level of attention as in 2006 when dealt with it in a special fashion. This is important, especially in a dispute that is mainly focused on construction lumber. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Pelletier, for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jerome Pelletier, and I'm the Vice President of the Sawmill Division at J.D. Irving Limited, and also the Chairperson of the New Brunswick Lumber Producers, the NBLP. I'm pleased to appear before the committee today to speak about the Softwood Lumber Agreement and its importance to the lumber producers in the province of New Brunswick. The New Brunswick lumber producers are made up of 9 lumber producers in the province. We represent 95% of the softwood lumber production here in New Brunswick. The NBLP is a key part of the New Brunswick forest products value chain. We're the largest wood buyers for the local private woodlot owners, supporting thousands of mill employees, professional loggers, truckers, and silviculture workers in all regions of the province. We, the NBLP, are the largest supplier of wood, chips, biomass, and sawdust, which are all the key ingredients in the manufacturing of New Brunswick's pulp, paper, and wood pellets products. We also supply products to wood fencing manufacturing facilities as well as pellet manufacturing operations located all here in New Brunswick. There are currently 40,000 registered private and industrial woodlot owners in New Brunswick. Historically, the Government of New Brunswick Timber Utilization Survey reports that approximately 50% of the wood supply comes from private land. This makes New Brunswick the only Canadian province with Nova Scotia where such a large volume of logs come from private sources. The New Brunswick forests are sustainably managed. In fact, New Brunswick Crown Forests have a growing inventory of timber and among the lowest losses to pest and fire in Canada. The majority of the finished products produced with logs originated from the New Brunswick forest are third-party certified through chain of custody standards like the Sustainability Forest Initiative, SFI. New Brunswick falls mostly in the Acadian forest type, a natural diverse forest, not only from a species perspective, but also in terms of age diversity. I think it is important for the committee members to understand the significance of the forest product sector to the New Brunswick economy. The following information comes from Statistic Canada. New Brunswick forest product sector generates more economic activity than any other industrial sector in the province of New Brunswick. There are 900 companies operating in the forest sector of the province, and we operate in 70% of our communities. In 2021, New Brunswick's forest product sector generated the highest provincial GDP per capita in Canada, which was 56% more than the next closest province. The New Brunswick forest product sector exported $2.9 billion worth of products in 2019. In 2021, the sector directly employed 11,800 employees. When you add an indirect and induced employment, there are over 23,000 people employed in the province. That is 1 in every 18 people in New Brunswick, in the New Brunswick workforce. The New Brunswick forest product sector contributed to $1.5 billion worth of employment income in 2019. As you can see, a strong forest sector is vital to the economy of New Brunswick. This fact leads into the next part of my remarks, which directly relates to the importance of the softwood lumber agreement to the New Brunswick lumber producers. Since the anti-dumping and the countervailing duties were unfairly imposed by the U.S. Department of Commerce in 2017, the NBLP have paid an average of combined duty rate of almost 14%. Their current cash deposits paid by the NBLP is now over $500 million Canadian. The total amount of cash deposits paid by all Canadian producers is now over $8 billion, making the current trade case one of the longest and most expensive in the Canadian history. The impact of the duty imposed on the NBLP significantly reduces our capacity to compete with other lumber producers located in the northeast of the United States, Scandinavia, and Europe. As part of the trade dispute resolution process under the North American Free Trade Agreement and the Canadian-United States-Mexico Agreement, NAFTA and CUSMA, several appeals have been filed by the New Brunswick lumber producers and other Canadian lumber producers. Although NAFTA and CUSMA direct that a final panel decision be made in less than 1 year, after more than 5 years, no decision has been made. We expect the outcome of the decisions from the NAFTA and CUSMA appeals will be favorable for Canada and the NBLP. We also expect that a significant portion of the cash deposits will be refunded to the Canadian lumber producers as well as NBLP. The current trade case between Canada and the U.S. is the 5th one in the last 40 years. In the last four trade cases, the softwood lumber dispute was resolved when the Canadian and the U.S. governments made it a priority. For that reason, the NBLP respectfully asked the government of Canada to, number one, insist that the U.S. comply with the NAFTA and CUSMA appeal procedures, with the goal to meet all ruling deadlines as specified in the trade agreements. Number two, work jointly with all parties of each province, lumber associations, and lumber producers to develop a negotiation strategy. And number three, encourage the United States Trade Representative Catherine Tay to enter into serious negotiations to resolve this long-term standing issue. Dear members of the International Trade Committee, this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. On to the members. Mr. Seaback for 6 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. One of the things that we've heard from industry is that industry had requested that the government appoint a lead negotiator / envoy to resolve the dispute. And if my memory serves correctly, the trade minister asked for a name, and Mr. McNaughton's name was put forward. But to my understanding, nothing's happened with that. I asked the minister at this committee, I think maybe 5 times, if she had raised appointing special envoys or negotiators to try and resolve the dispute with her U.S. counterparts, and she refused to answer the question. I'm wondering if any of the industry representatives have any thoughts on why she refused to answer that question. That was to anyone. It could be Mr. Cripps. It could be Mr. Pelletier. It could be Mr. Kennedy. Anyone. Mr. Arkell. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I see. Okay, so I want to talk to Mr. Cripps. Mr. Cripps, you're suggesting that there's a failure to have these panels run properly. The Americans are not appointing, and I think you said they're not appointing nonpartisan people. They're slow to nominate, and then you gave a third thing, which I didn't get all of. Who makes these appointments? Is this the U.S. administration that's making these appointments?
So thank you very much for the question. So just to reiterate the 3 concerns we have with respect to the panel process. 1, as you mentioned, exceedingly slow. 2, those that have been nominated, by and large, have been anything but independent and impartial. We've had a number of appointments where there's been a conflict of interest, where the Canadian government has raised concerns around it, and yet the United States continues to renominate the candidates. And the third is the fact that they're not being done, they're being done successively. So we have a number of panel requests in, and instead of having them,
they're running consecutively.
You got it. You got it. So that's our third concern.
And who's making those decisions? This would be the president's administration. Is that correct?
The U.S. administration is making those in conjunction with the Department of Commerce.
This isn't being driven by some rogue senators or representatives or the industry itself. This is a decision that's being made directly by the Biden administration. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
So this would appear to me to be something that has to be resolved on a government-to-government basis. Would you agree with me on that?
We would really like to see at the highest levels, the administrations on both sides lean in to ensure that we have functioning panel processes. We fought long and hard through the NAFTA negotiations, now through CUSMA, to get these panels, to get this process, and we'd really like to see those processes be held in a way that is impartial, functioning, and running in good faith.
But this isn't just we're not going to negotiate. We hear this all the time, right? We try, we raised it, but they're not interested in negotiating. This is actual, it seems to me, a myriad of tactics to prevent a decision from being made entirely. Would you, or delaying that as long as possible? Would you agree with my assessment of that?
Well, I would argue that I believe that the processes have not been adhered to in good faith, and these processes were negotiated by both sides, both the United States and Canada, to ensure that we had functioning panels, so that when disputes came up under CUSMA or softwood lumber, we'd have fair and impartial panels. And I would argue
the Americans appear to be ragging the puck, to use a hockey analogy.
That's a great analogy to use. Yes, being an Edmonton Oilers fan.
And the only way to stop them from doing that would be for the Canadian government to find a way to stop them from doing that. Would that not also be correct?
We believe that we need pressure at the highest levels of government to ensure that we have properly operating panel processes.
And the failure of any movement on these panels, the issue with panels, or an actual agreement itself, that would be a failure of the government to get the U.S. to move on these issues, would it not be? Because there's no one else who can do it.
We do believe that Global Affairs Canada, we do believe that Minister Ng has really pushed it very hard, pushed it, as I understanding, every meeting that she's had with her counterpart. We do believe that this has been raised by Prime Minister Trudeau to President Biden. We just asked that we need to actually have increased engagement so that we actually have highly functioning panels.
Sorry, Mr. Seebeck, you have 15 seconds.
Kennedy, what should we do differently?
In terms of being done differently, we just need to continue to actually push hard to ensure that the U.S. are following in good faith these panel processes, get proper appointments in place, and get the hearings happening concurrently.
Thank you very much. Mr. Varani, please, for 6 minutes.
I'll pick up there because this is something that you're probably all aware that we just had a trade trip to Washington, and we're pretty unified in Team Canada approach in terms of addressing various irritants, and the lack of sort of robust mechanisms under CUSMA or the WTO was a pet issue of mine that I raised at repeated refrains. So, Mr. Kennedy, so what Mr. Seebeck was trying to ask you is what should we be doing differently to make sure that this is on the utmost priority level for the U.S. administration, because it has been raised and is repeatedly raised by Mary Ng with Catherine Tai, and it was raised with President Biden when he was here in March. So it's not for lack of effort, but in terms of creative suggestions, over to you, Mr. Kennedy, in terms of what should be done differently.
Thank you for the question. There's no doubt this is a serious challenge, and we understand that a range of stakeholders and political leaders have attempted to move this conversation forward over the past several years. In terms of new ideas, it is important to also work with some of the folks who can put pressure internally on the administration. So when there are members of Congress, leading senators that do express support for a softwood lumber negotiation, those could be key allies for Canada to help push this forward. And of course, they still have a difficult time in making the case with the administration. But we do see those folks as possible allies. There are industry groups as well, especially when I know many people in politics and policy are focused on affordability to frame this in the context of improving affordability. And the senators last year who did weigh in did make that case around home affordability. So I think we all acknowledge that there's been a lot of effort put into this over the past several years to help get us to a point that we can negotiate a softwood lumber agreement. But we would appreciate a renewed effort, and anywhere that we can be helpful, other associations can be helpful. I think we'd be happy to support the government's initiative.
I could just stay with you, Mr. Kennedy, because you mentioned something about the WTO appellate body as well. Others had raised it, but can you tell me strategically, do you think, since there seems to be some appetite, indeed the U.S. have made a commitment to have that appellate body functioning by 2024, that would one approach to be to do it seriatim, so sort of trying to address the WTO mechanism, get it up and running in a way that the Americans can agree to, and sort of say, look, here's an example, things can actually work, and then turn to the CUSMA panel? Like, should it be approached incrementally to sort of get them on the same page as us?
That's an excellent question, because we have a number of cases through different venues with NAFTA, CUSMA, and the WTO. Maybe just more broadly on the issue of the WTO appellate body, we were very much encouraged to see the United States commit, through other WTO parties, to agree to restore functionality. I think we still have some ways to go to get to that point in time, but we see that as an opening to restore the body. There are U.S. stakeholders that have also been very supportive of getting to that point in time. Canada is a leader through the Ottawa Group in engaging countries toward reforming and restoring functionality to WTO. So Canada is in an excellent position with its partners to intensify its efforts with the United States to get us to a point that we can restore that body. And it could become a vehicle that we can at least address this dispute, or for the future to have a functioning dispute settlement system globally. But in terms of what an actual softwood lumber agreement would include, including if we were to drop certain cases, I don't know how that process would play out or would be preferable to certain industry groups. But we do see the restoration of the dispute settlement system at WTO as a positive step in addressing this dispute and others.
Thank you. If I could turn to Nick Arkell, of Gorman Brothers Lumber. So you'd mentioned Minister Ng's visit out to your location and understanding sort of on the ground what challenges high-value producers are facing. Could you flesh that out a little bit in terms of sort of the differentiation in the work and the product that you're providing to U.S. customers as opposed to the sort of building materials softwood lumber that's going into primarily the construction of houses?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. For high-value products, as you just point out, doesn't get put behind drywall. Tends to be a product that is graded on visuals. It's graded on feel because it's what people are using in their home finishing and renovation. So products like ceilings, like walls, feature walls, flooring. It would be probably used in baseboards, casings around windows, siding to houses, decking, particularly when you're looking at a product like cedar. The way I describe high-value products is it's margin through value, where the commodity world is a price taker. The world tells it how much it's going to pay for a product, and they have to produce that product at the lowest cost possible. That's their comparative advantage to their neighbors. We see the world differently, and this is the niche that we're in, is that we say we don't mind spending another $5 on producing a product through a very refined process if we're getting $10 or $6 more for value. So it really is margin through value. What are the differences? Things like, let me pick an example, our drying process. Whereas a dimension mill doesn't need to be as exacting. They can put their lumber into a dry kiln maybe for a day and a half, something like that. We'll put lumber into a dry kiln to get it dried down to the right moisture content that isn't going to twist and warp when it ends up in a house. It could be in for 5 to 10 days. Then we put our products through specialized equipment for giving a very fine finish. So instead of through a regular planer, as we would call them, we'll put them through molders. So everything is just more refined than it would be for the construction dimension business.
Thank you very much. Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. Thanks for your opening statements as well. So I would like to ask some questions to the representatives from the different industries. So in 2022, we held a study on U.S.-Canada relationship, especially on softwood lumber. So there was a chapter in the report on this topic that recommended that the government prioritize the goal of reestablishing the anti-dumping and countervailing duties that producers had paid to the U.S. So did they give these duties back to the industry, to producers? That's my first question. Mr. Cripps, Mr. Arkell, Mr. Pelletier, if you could answer. Yes, I can try to give you an answer to that question. I think you are referencing what is the money that was given when these products are exported. Yes, I'm speaking of countervailing and anti-dumping duties that were implemented by the U.S. So they did not give these countervailing duties back to Canadian producers, and they will not be able to do so until NAFTA and CUSMA have finished working on this file. And we did reference this in our presentation. So there were several appeals within NAFTA and CUSMA and their tribunals. So when these appeals are finished, when the committees will be able to confirm a conclusion, that's when they will be able to redistribute these countervailing and anti-dumping duties to Canadian companies. So historically, this money has been redistributed when we have come to an agreement between both countries. So this is what we would like to see. We think that the judicial process is an important part of the process. We need to make sure that we are working with the courts, and we do think that this will be dealt with when we come to a final agreement between the U.S. and Canada, and then we will be able to negotiate redistributing these duties. So we have these countervailing duties, but then there's also anti-dumping duties that were punitive. So typically the U.S. Is found to be in the wrong by the courts. And we have many companies that face bankruptcies. So what I would see is that we send this money to the industry directly so that they be able to deal with these costs. Now, have you had this type of discussion with the government? We did not have discussions with the government concerning redistributing these countervailing duties to Canadian companies for the time being. We do believe that this should be done through the legal process that has already begun. We do think that NAFTA and CUSMA processes are not following the timeline that was initially negotiated, so there have been a lot of delays. But no, we have not had any discussions on the topic of redistributing these duties to Canadian companies. So I'd like to broaden the question as well, Madam Chair, if I'll let you redistribute our rounds following this, but I was referencing a study from last fall on Canada-U.S. relations. The Council of Forestry of Quebec encouraged the government to further consult the provinces, but also stakeholders in the forestry sector, as well as other relevant partners to find the best solution to put an end to this dispute. And in this study, a large company that actually handles 1/3 of Quebec exports was mentioned in the report. So since last fall, do you think that there has been increased dialogue on this topic? You said you didn't have discussions specifically on this, but has there in general been more discussion to put an end to these disputes, and have they consulted with the industry? So I'd like to hear everyone on this topic. So there have been 2 roundtables with Minister Ng last fall, as far as I'm aware. There were direct consultations with different producers and different associations. We hold true to our position. We think that we need to speed up discussions between Canadian provinces, between producers, in order to create a proper negotiation strategy. Madam Chair, if you could distribute the rounds.
Remaining in your time.
Then I'll continue on my next round. Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Seebeck was trying to get my attention.
I just got an email that there might be bells at 12:30, and so I would suggest that maybe we stop at 12:30, do our in-camera till 12:45, and then people can get to the vote as they need.
Is everybody okay with that?
We'll do that in camera?
Yes, but we'll stop at 12:30.
Go in camera.
Go in camera.
Do our committee business.
And, all right, everybody will get to the House for the vote if that's what they want. Okay, thank you. Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and thanks for all the witnesses for being here today, and thanks especially to Nick Arco for giving me a shout out. And full disclosure, in my previous life, maybe 25 years ago, I did do a couple of contracts with Gorman Brothers and met Nick then, and so it's been a long and happy relationship there. And I just wanted to pick up on this concern about the high-value producers and how they've been disproportionately impacted. And Nick, you mentioned that in the previous, in the 2006 deal, they were treated differently because of that impact. And I'm just wondering if you wanted to expand on what happened then and what you would like to see with a new solution to this dispute.
Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously, I'd like high-value products to be excluded, be recognized as being something different. What they did back then was, and I believe it was something that was put into the negotiated agreement at the very end, and it was a cap. They put a cap on the value and said that after a certain amount, which I believe back then was $500, there wouldn't be any extra duty paid. So that was that tax back then. It was on a sliding scale, but once you hit that amount, it was. So I assume what they tried to do there was take high value and make it somewhat similar to construction dimension lumber as far as the way it would get treated. So there was an equitability across the board. Whereas right now, as I pointed out and you just picked up on, was is that today we pay the duty on the total value of that product going across the border. So we're sending something across at $1,500, 1,000 board feet, with a lot of cost associated with that. We're paying the duty based on $1,500. Whereas someone else is paying it based on today, $350.
Right, and if I understand correctly, products like glulam beams and CLT panels are excluded already. They are, you could argue, just higher value products similar to yours, maybe taken one step further in the manufacturing process. So they are excluded. Why not exclude your products, which are very different from simple 2x4s and 2x6s?
That's correct.
Okay. I was going to ask Jeff Bromley some questions about the British Columbia situation, and it looks like he had to catch a plane. So I'll continue with you, Mr. Arkell. About various mills in British Columbia have been closed or curtailed. Just wondering if you could perhaps comment in your experience. Gorman's has several mills. Which of these mills have been closed and why? Why are they have been impacted to the point that they have closed? Are they big companies that are just trimming around the edges, or are they small mills? What are the factors that are really hurting mills in British Columbia in particular?
The changes to the number of mills in the province is really based on the available fiber supply. As most of the committee are probably aware, we had a mountain pine beetle infestation go through the province back in the 1980s, 90s, into the 2000s. It attacked a lot of the interior lodgepole pine, which is really the staple for a large part of the interior industry. We've had forest fires associated with that as well. There was a decision back then to harvest timber before it deteriorated to a point where it had no value, which I believe was the right decision to make. But at some point, we all knew there was going to be a day of reckoning to come back to what by law we have to be at a sustainable level. So you're only cutting what you've got in growing stock and what's in standing timber. We knew that if we were overcutting to remove the damaged timber, that someday there was going to be a reduction in that supply, and that someday is today. And so what you're seeing is this rebalancing of mill capacity with the available fiber supply. A lot of mills are having to make decisions to shut down completely. Some have just curtailed production. With us, we quite often get asked the question, well, why haven't you shut down a mill? And I say we have. And those people then look at me with great surprise and say, no, you've got all your mills running. And I say, well, no, we've gone from 3 shifts to 2 shifts in 3 of our primary operations. That means we have shut down 1 mill. It's the equivalency. And so what you're seeing in the province is a lot of equivalency as well. So total mill closures and equivalency.
Just one further question onto that. For a while, last year or so, lumber prices were very high. Mills seemed to be handling the tariff situation because prices were so high. Now prices are lower. I assume that's impacting mills as well, and also impacting them in the future because the anti-dumping tariffs will increase because of those low prices. If you can comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, we've come off a sugar high, no doubt about it. Two of the best years the industry had experienced probably ever, certainly in recent memory. One year we hit $1,600 $1,000 US for dimension lumber. And then we came down to the lofty low of 1,400 the following year, and we all started to think that maybe this is the new norm. Well, we should know better. We're back to 20-year averaging again, and so that's a bit of a shock to the system. But I think it was sort of expected. But it does mean we're still trying to balance our delivered log costs, our operating costs, with what the market is prepared to pay at the other end. And that's the struggle today. Having said that, we needed those 2 years because we just come off about 5 years of not much better than break even or heavy losses.
Okay,
So
thank you very
was,
much, sir. Sorry to interrupt. Mr. Carey for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I too wanted to ask questions of Mr. Bromley in regards to jobs at risk, job losses. But I think I'll shift over to Mr. Kennedy. You mentioned, 6 million jobs in Canada, small businesses, and that we require certainty in the industry. And without certainty, we really can't make plans, we can't make investments. The future isn't as clear. Now, I remember when we were first in government in 2006, we were faced with making an agreement with the Harper government, and I remember Mr. Emerson, we were successful. It wasn't a perfect agreement, but it did give certainty. Fast forward to 2015, one of the first things that we had on our plate was the original TPP. Canada walked away from that. It really was Mr. Obama's deal. And my understanding, there was a lot of upset in the United States when we walked away from that. But to give him credit, Mr. Obama appointed, I believe his name was Michael Froman and Madame Freeland. And in March of 2016, he instructed them to come back within 100 days so that this would be resolved. And I think you're aware that that failed. We had another administration, the Trump administration, with Kuzma. We had a great opportunity to get something solidified there. Nothing happened. And now with Mr. Biden, he was just here a short period ago, we had an opportunity to get it resolved. So, it has to be a priority, has to be a negotiated settlement. And Mr. Seaback did talk to the panel here today about this idea of a special envoy. And I really didn't get a clear response. And I'm just curious, are you and your members, are you in favor of a special envoy? Mr. McNaughton's name was brought up because it seems what's going on isn't really working. We're not getting that certainty that you say is so important. Could you comment on that a little bit more clearly?
Thank you for the question. And absolutely, we would be supportive, having an individual or individuals leading the effort to bring, fundamentally to get U.S. policymakers on board with the negotiation is important, and that seems to be where we're struggling at the moment. So having somebody who's familiar with policymaking in the United States, the stakeholder community, that can really drive this for Canada would be beneficial, whether that's Mr. McNaughton or another senior former official or somebody with experience in the industry. But we do need to find a way to move this discussion forward, and unfortunately, the administration has not at least considered this to be a priority at the time. So we should consider many options, including working with other members of I know suggestions have come up here, working with the provinces and other stakeholders in Canada. But anything that we can do through our networks to help drive this forward as well.
Well, I think it has to be at the highest levels. And I was wondering, perhaps maybe you could comment, because I was going to talk to Mr. Bromley about the jobs. And a good friend of mine is a union steward in a mill, and there's concerns on the ground. Could you comment on investments in the industry in the last few years, or a hesitancy to make investments to improve our productivity because of the uncertainty, and maybe foreign direct investment if you could even talk about the opportunities that we do have, however, they might be held back because of this uncertainty.
Perhaps as a broad comment, I mean, what we saw with CUSMA entering into force was the restoration of certainty in the industry across many industries, not the softwood lumber industry necessarily. And with that, we've seen companies comfortably make long-term investments for a number of sectors. And unfortunately, we haven't necessarily seen that extend to the softwood lumber industry. So we would welcome any initiative that could bring the certainty that other industries have experienced through CUSMA. For those firms.
Well, I'm just concerned. It seems to be getting worse. Like you mentioned, the Buy American. You know, instead of improving, we got the Buy American thrown on us. The WHO or WTO. That's not working either. Perhaps, Mr. Cripps, would you be able to comment on the idea about these investments? I know Mr. Arkell said, you know, he has equivalent shut down mills, and I'm hearing from the ground that people are really concerned about it. And this is a great opportunity. We know that Canadian lumber will help with the climate change, and it just seems not to be a priority. Would you be able to comment on the amount of investments perhaps we're losing out on unless the government makes this a super priority?
I'm sorry, Mr. Carey, your time is up. Mr. Cripps, if you could give a brief answer to a long question.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member, for the question. I would certainly echo Mr. Kennedy's comments around needing certainty. Business always needs certainty. It certainly helps with the investment climate. I would say from a forestry perspective, from an Alberta perspective, a number of factors go into what that certainty looks like, and there's a number of policies that are not just federally driven but provincially driven that can impact. Long story short, we very much believe in the sustainability of our industry and the fact that we are a key contributor to net zero to reduction and net zero to 2050. And the more that we can get investment certainty will help with increased investment within the country for forestry and in Alberta in particular.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Sheehan for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to make the following statement that, you know, we have forest fires happening all across Canada, and we have, we're thinking about all the people that work in the forest and the bush, as we say in Northern Ontario, to stay safe. And thanks to all the fire crews that are out there, you know, protecting people and protecting those people's livelihoods as well. So thank you for that. My first question, Madam Chair, is to the Business Council of Canada. Can you provide an analysis of the political and economic factors within the United States that contribute to the current stance on the softwood lumber dispute and hinder the prospects of negotiations?
Thank you for the question. Happy to weigh in. So, to our understanding, at least at the administration level, this has not been a priority. And I know we've seen some public statements from USTR indicating that they would be open to a negotiation. However, we know we haven't been able to move the discussion forward, at least with this administration, and I suppose the previous administration as well. There are we're aware of groups like the Lumber Coalition in the United States that have favored delaying a negotiation and perhaps are providing political support to the approach that the administration is taking. Within Congress, it's a bit more complicated, and we've seen some congressional leaders, like we did last year, express support for a softwood lumber agreement. I know when Ambassador Tai had her testimony in front of the House Ways and Means Committee earlier this year, she was asked by some members of Congress what their approach was. So there are some supportive voices in Congress, and there are also voices that are critical of Canadian lumber policy as well in certain parts of the country, areas where they have an industry that they're protecting. So it is a complicated political environment, but we do know that all three parties, and this includes Mexico as well, through USMCA, do value the agreement. Once again, the certainty that it provides. We think the agreement, collectively, the business community calls all three countries support implementation and enforcement of the agreement. So it is critically important that all three countries do honor the agreement and understand this in that context as well. And so we are hopeful that at least we'll be able to create the political conditions in the near future to get the United States to come to the table and have an honest discussion about how we can resolve this dispute for the long term. That would be a favorable development.
Thank you for that. My next question is going to be to the New Brunswick lumber producers. My college roommate was from Dalhousie, New Brunswick, and his father and his summer jobs were at the mill there. So I can tell you, I know, and well, I've heard about that area quite a bit. So my question to you, in your opinion, what role can the Canadian lumber industry alongside the government play in advocating for negotiations and demonstrating the importance of resolving the softwood lumber dispute to both countries' economic interests?
Excuse me, Mr. Sheehan, can you get your video back on, please? There you go. Thank you. Please continue.
I think I did the same thing.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Sheehan. I think, as you know, we live in a large country, and the forest regime in every province is different. So it's a complex issue to start a negotiation. So I think the answer to your question here is the industry has to work very closely with the government on developing a negotiation strategy. And I believe the more interactions we have with Minister Ng or any members of intergovernmental affairs on working on building what that framework should look like early on is key to start a constructive and effective negotiation with the USTR.
So there seems to be slight differences between the provinces that was mentioned by one of the speakers here. And I know that in Ontario, my brother-in-law worked for the MNR on the softwood, the provincial group of the MNR for years, going back like years and years and years and years. And what seems to be the difference that the Americans are getting hung up on?
I'm not sure if the Americans have a specific opinion on a specific province or a specific item on the Canadian industry. I can't answer that question, unfortunately.
Perhaps to the one that mentioned about there are some provincial differences. I don't know if it was Jason or Nick that had mentioned it. If you could, I don't know if you have a lot of time here to answer that, and maybe someone could submit it in writing if they don't.
Thank you, member. I'll just quickly speak. That was more about the different policies at a provincial level that impact growth in a forestry sector. Was not speaking, and I apologize if I misspoke, but I was not speaking to U.S. differences within Canada. We very much believe in a Team Canada approach when we look to negotiating softwood lumber agreement. It has to be absolutely Team Canada approach.
Yeah, because I think you guys had mentioned it sometimes. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Your time is up. Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Yes, Madam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question this time will be for Mr. Arkell. In 2006, your association came and appeared at our committee. And this was on the topic of the softwood lumber agreement. So this was 2006, and they used the term an abomination. So this was the last time that we were able to settle this type of dispute. In your recommendations, you said that we should be beginning new negotiations to put an end to this dispute, hopefully in a sustainable manner. Can you comment on this, please?
Okay, I'm going to apologize profusely, but my French is not good, and I'm not getting a translation. I don't know whether we're supposed to get those.
Yeah, no, we should have.
Monsieur Arkell, normalement, il y a de l'interprétation.
Oh, it's not. You don't have your globe on, Madam Clerk. Would you like to address what's the problem?
So there should be a globe icon at the bottom of your screen, and you can choose English interpretation.
Okay.
Avant que je recommence.
Should I start my question again once you've confirmed that you're hearing the interpretation? Will I be able to keep my time? Yes? Okay. Mr. Arco, so your company appeared in 2006 in front of this committee. Mr. Reedy represented your company, and he criticized the softwood lumber agreement from 2006 and said that it was, I quote, an abomination. And this was the last time in 2006 that we were able to find a solution to this dispute. In future negotiations, looking for a new sustainable agreement, what would be your recommendations to avoid repeating the errors of the past that were mentioned by your company in the past?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Reedy's been gone a long time, and I imagine views and approaches have changed dramatically since then. My understanding was back in those days that there were two groups in BC with differing views of how this should be approached. I think today, as I mentioned, we are members of the BC Lumber Trade Council. And so therefore we're supporting, and we do support because the messaging coming forward from BC Lumber Trade Council is a combined and collaborative effort. And then going to Jason's point is that then fits into the Team Canada type approach. So the abomination, boy, that's a pretty strong term, but it's before my time, and that certainly isn't the approach we would take today.
Parfait. Et vous...
And then earlier, I asked a question for everyone, but I don't think that you heard my question since you didn't have interpretation. I was wondering, were you personally consulted on the topic of what was recommended in our last study last fall on the topic of Canada-US relations? It was recommended that we consult further with stakeholders in the lumber industry. So were you consulted?
Yeah, I certainly would have been through the BC Lumber Trade Council. I sit on that board, and so any kind of communication coming back from Ottawa through BC Lumber Trade Council, I would have been part of.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Cannings for 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and I'll continue with Mr. Arco. And you mentioned, as I was questioning you earlier, about the headwinds that the BC industry faces through reduced fiber supply, through beetle epidemics and forest fires, etc. And I'm just wondering if what is a real black box for me in this whole thing is how the U.S. sets the rates of these illegal tariffs. And I'm just wondering if those changing circumstances for the BC industry in particular are taken into account by their methods. How much farther you have to go to get trees, all those extra costs because of that reduced supply.
Yeah, I don't think that comes into any of the thinking. It's all about the value of the product going across the border. The costs associated with that aren't considered at all.
And yet, theoretically, these tariffs are in place because they think your costs are too low. At least the costs that you pay to obtain the rights to harvest that timber.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma because the world we live in today is very different to when these disputes started. And a lot of the assumptions that were made being fed into the dispute, as you point out, there's a lot less fiber supply today. There's a lot less lumber going across the border today. It's going at much higher cost. It's a very different world.
Thank you. I'll just leave my questions there. Thanks to everybody.
Very much. Mr. Seaback for 5 minutes, please.
Great. So I'm going to ask my questions if Mr. Kennedy and then Mr. Cripps, if you can respond. So if I look at this, we've got Administrative Review 1, then the second Administrative Review where we've requested a panel, then the third Administrative Review where we've requested a panel, and we're probably going to request a panel on the 4th administrative review. Now, they will not allow these to be decided concurrently. They're going to be decided consecutively. So what I keep hearing from the government is, we always win, and once we win, they'll come to the table to resolve. But the fact that these are now going to be staggered, and who knows how long, if it's taken 5 years to get a panel on one, will it take 5 years to get a panel on the second administrative review? Doesn't it make it crystal clear that the only way that this is going to be resolved is a direct government-to-government negotiated solution? Just want your thoughts on that, and Mr. Cripps, your thoughts as well.
So absolutely, we agree that the only sustainable long-term solution is a new softwood lumber agreement. Even if the dispute settlement system were operating as intended and with shorter time frames, we would expect that we'd continue to experience this cycle. So we do think that, and this is where it's also in the best interest of the United States as well. We do need to have a long-term, durable solution for both countries. The question is, how do you get the other party to the table? And that's the real challenge here. And we can appreciate it's a significant challenge, but one that perhaps we can make some real progress toward in the months ahead, and we certainly hope we can.
Mr. Cripps?
Yeah, I would echo that and just add that having the panel decisions gives us more quivers in our bow to actually come to the table with wins. If you look at softwood number 4, the panel processes stacked up a number of wins for Canada again and again and again. So it gave us a strong negotiating position to operate from. So that's why it's so important that these panel processes get going in good faith, get decisions so that it strengthens, puts us in a good position at the negotiating table.
Suggest to you that the panels aren't being put together in good faith. The panels are being deliberately taking a long time to form, and they won't run consecutively. So the old strategy, which was wait until we win and then they'll come to the table, I'm suggesting is a strategy that's going to cause further damage to the softwood lumber industry. We can't wait for all of these administrative review panels to be decided. I think it's more urgent than ever that we have a focused government trying to resolve it, not waiting for the wins. The wins will be great, but we could get one now, another one in 2, 3, 4 years, and we're already at $8 billion in duties. So I guess I'm going to go back to, would you agree with me that the critical thing is for the current government to find a way, come hell or high water, to get this resolved instead of waiting for the panels to make their decisions?
I would caveat that by saying it can't be at all. It has to be the right deal. We cannot enter a deal that is a bad deal. So, again, I'm only speaking on behalf of the Alberta Forest Products Association and by extension, the Alberta Softwood Lumber Trade Council. But no deal is better than a bad deal, because the last thing you want to do is lock yourself in for 5 or 10 years of a bad deal.
Did you want to respond to that as well?
Well, I think the industry, especially the folks that are witnesses, we're better prepared to speak about the specific industry dynamics. So absolutely, if we do negotiate a deal, it has to be a good deal for Canada. And I think the different dynamics across this country, it'd be important to get voices from those folks maybe about what that could look like.
And so if there's another 5 years without a deal, what damage will that do to the softwood lumber industry in Canada? Any of the softwood lumber folks, if you want to respond to that.
Brief answers if you can, whoever wants to respond. Does anyone want to respond to?
Comment on what the damage to the industry will be if there's another 5 years without resolution?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Seaback. I don't see responses coming. I'm on to Mr. Miao for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. First, Mr. Kennedy, our committee is in the midst of studying non-tariff trade barrier, and I was wondering if you can point out any specific NTB that have arose specifically in the light of the Canada-U.S. softwood lumber issue.
So I think maybe just to answer the question in a different way. I mean, we can appreciate how complex this agreement is between the U.S. and Canada. And you know, going back to just to flag for the committee's awareness, we are approaching the third Free Trade Commission meeting between the three parties for USMCA, the halfway point before our mandatory review of USMCA. We did sign a good agreement for all three countries, and we think it's very important that all parties prioritize implementing and enforcing the agreement as negotiated. And we have some occasions coming up in the near future where we'll be able to drive some attention toward that and hope that we'll have a smooth renewal process in 2026.
Next, I'd like to address to Mr. Arkos. I understand Gorman Brothers have been around for a long time, a very long time, in fact. And I'm curious if you can share with the committee some of the insight in how the previous softwood lumber agreement worked for a company like yours, and if you think Canada can learn any lesson from it while negotiating a future agreement.
Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we're what we would call a small to mid-sized company. We don't have the ability to go to the public markets to raise financing. I think of various operations that we've purchased where we've had to put our houses up for security as a family. Total disclosure, I'm part of the family, the ownership of the company. And we've had to put up that kind of security. Back in 2006, 2007, when we received duty return, we were right on the verge of losing one of our companies in a community where we have 350 employees out of a community of 8,000. And if you look at, the dependents, you look at all the spin-off benefits of that company, that would have been devastating to that community. But we were within an inch, if I can put it in a distance, of losing that operation due to the pressures that we'd been experiencing through that particular softwood dispute. So it drains the financial capabilities you have for investing. It takes away, earlier on, people were using the term certainty. And I would say, well, my experience is there's no such thing as certainty, but we do need predictability. And the dispute takes away predictability. We need to be able to plan for investments into the operations that support the families that we have operating with us. And the dispute just adds to the lack of predictability.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Next, I'd like to go to Mr. Cripps. I do like to get your thoughts on the national supply chain strategy. As earlier in this year, your association was advocating for better rail freight service for the region. How would you see a national supply chain strategy work to alleviate some of the pressure faced by your industry right now?
Thank you very much for the question. And that's something that we've been advocating quite strongly about. Sorry, I had a frog in my throat. In essence, we're seeing increased growth of natural resource products coming from the North, Alberta in particular, and having a national supply chain strategy would certainly help look to increase investment within actually all of Canada with respect to rail, roads, ports. But in particular, we're in the North beholden to one rail service provider, and ensuring that as national supply chain strategy would ensure investment into northern communities across Canada to increase that we can actually get our products to market. Extremely important. So, but it's not just rail, it's roads, it's ports. It really needs to be a combined systemic approach as we continue to, we're an export dependent nation, and we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support that export industries.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our witnesses. We appreciate the valuable information. We will suspend while we go in camera. Thank you. For committee business.